This special event has been put together to help inform and educate our families, share resources in our state, and talk about ways to help prevent a crisis with a loved one with disabilities from becoming a preventable tragedy. The Utah Parent Center was founded on the concept of parents helping parents. We all have children with special needs and can relate to many things you are going through. Many of the staff at our center are parents of youth or young adults who have experienced the same worries as many of you here today. Here with us, we have Jessica Waters. She is social work director at the Salt Lake City Police Department and the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Unit.
So I'm the social work director for Salt Lake City Police Department, and currently we have 7 social workers. So this is individuals who have either a bachelor's degree in social work or a master's degree in social work. And we are trying to hire 3 more in hopes to get it fully staffed. So we have 5 case managers, and then we will have 3 clinicians. So what we do is we are paired with crisis intervention team officers. So I'm sure some people have heard, and maybe not everyone has heard, CIT, Crisis Intervention Team, Crisis Intervention Training. And this is a training that many police departments do across the nation. Here in Utah, we do this as well. And so what this is, officers go through this 40-hour training, and it deals with all different mental health and developmental stuff to figure out how do we best interact with people. Because yes, officers are going to have to respond to a call, but a lot of times mental health, so many different factors play into one call, and it's not just one thing happening. And so officers get trained, and we do role plays. We help train them, and we will go through scenarios that we've been out on before. It may be, I don't know if I'm done any of this training because her team from uni also help out with this training. And so they will also, we'll do these. There's one good example for a training is in this training, there's a child with a developmental disability who has locked himself in the closet, and the brother is at work, and the child has locked himself into the closet at his job because he's the main caregiver. Am I cutting out at all? It says my internet's cutting a little bit. No? Okay, good. And so with this, we try and teach officers, how do we interact? A lot of times people focus on, let's get this child out of the closet. Yes, let's get the child out of the closet, but let's see what the kid needs. Let's hear what the child needs, but also let's hear what the caregiver needs. Because a lot of times, us as caregivers, we get overlooked, because we are figuring out so many different things. And so part of it is to figure out, how do we best help out the caregiver? Can we connect them to any other resources? Let's use the caregiver as they know so much information and a lot of intel that nobody else would know. We all know our children better than anybody else does. And so we have a team of social workers, and we pair up with CIT officers. So we have a squad, and that's what we refer ourselves to, where we have 4 CIT officers who work alongside our 7 social workers. So the goal for our job is for us to respond to any mental health or any social issue call. So if that is, say, a missing autistic child, someone experiencing mental health crisis, like Amanda mentioned that their mobile crisis outreach team does, we do that as well. I know there was a question in the box earlier for Amanda earlier on that said, should we call MCOT over police? And I think that's a great question to ask because it's commonly, who do I call when I am in crisis? And I would strongly encourage people to call MCOT to get that mental health, right away. And I do think if someone is an emergency and they need immediate help and officers, to call 911. I don't want to tell anyone not to call 911. But with our team, we kind of focus more on a little bit, I don't know I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it. We go out on calls that may just be like, a missing child, or it may be a family disturbance happening. So there's an argument going on, and we're trying to figure out how we can connect people to services. So our goal is to go out to these calls, to take these calls from your regular patrol officer who may not be trained as well in mental health and knowing all different conditions and how to interact with every different individual. So we try and take those calls. The unfortunate side is that we are only staffed 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday right now. We're hoping to expand to become 24/7. and get more social workers on team and more specialized officers, so we can be the main individuals responding to all these calls. And so that's what our team does. We're referred to as a Community Connection Center, if anyone's heard that name before. We are in Salt Lake City. We're on 5th West and 2nd South. And like I said, we're social workers embedded in the police department for Salt Lake City. So it is a unique role. And I know there's just so many questions of, especially, I mean, most recently the incident that happened, which is really unfortunate, and, you know, just trying to figure out what happened, what could have happened, what we all can do to do better. And so a few things I want to point on that is really important, that MCOT is available to you 24/7, like Amanda mentioned, and they do not charge you. We also will not charge you for services. I do think it is important, if you feel that you do need an officer on scene, to call 911, because there are times, you know, sometimes like some people may be acting out and we need someone to intervene, but we also want to make sure we're just talking to them as well. And so a few things to know if you are calling 911. A lot of helpful information would be, especially if your child is autistic, something that they like and they don't like. Like, my child loves water. So knowing, oh, they love water. Or, you know, my child does not like being overstimulated. There's different things like that. It's helpful to have any of those key, like, quick things to know. And so that the officer can be notified, like, oh, this child loves stickers. And so they can show up on scene like, okay, I have stickers in hand. And also just letting them know your whereabouts, as many details as possible. Like, say, I'm on scene, I'm mom, I'm on scene, my child, it's helpful to have like real scenarios. I'm on scene, my child needs help. They are lower functioning, lower IQ, and so that what this means is, because a lot of times even dispatch doesn't really know. If those details are not given, it's not going to be dispatched out, and so officers may not know, oh, okay, this is what we're responding to. You know, they may just think it's a juvenile who just doesn't want to talk to their parents for the night. And so having all those details. And then I do think it is important when any things they like and don't like, that's one of the biggest things. But then also, like, what is your goal in this? Is your goal, because sometimes for individuals calling 911, it may just be like, help me calm my child down, or help me locate my child if my child has gone missing and wandered off. I'm letting them know what the goal is. Or it may be, I need my child to go to the hospital. Whether that is if anyone is familiar, we call it a pink sheet here in Utah. And that is when a mental health officer is able to sign over to admit you into the ER in hopes to hold you in the hospital because you are a risk to yourself or someone else. So if I'm threatening to hurt somebody or threatening to harm myself, then you can have an officer or a social worker, someone with the mobile crisis team with uni or with our own team of social workers, who can sign off on that and make sure the child goes to the hospital. And then it's up to the ER to evaluate them and decide if they stay. So it's helpful when calling 911 to state what your goal is in the end. My goal is have my child to come home, or my goal is to help calm my child down, or my goal is I need to get them to the hospital. And so if the goal is ever to get your child to the hospital, a few things to know. Whenever an officer does respond on scene, there will almost always be an ambulance that will respond as well if the goal is going to be going to the hospital. It's just kind of the way that this is, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Salt Lake City area. I'm not sure about the rest of the state, so if any of those questions come up, I'll try my best. But here in Salt Lake, that's what our protocol is that EMS will come out and they will do a general screening. And so even if we're going to the hospital based off of mental health or based off of stabilization, they're still going to screen them, check their heart rate, check their blood pressure. You know, sometimes if someone's really acting really different than what they normally are, they'll check blood sugar as well. But that would be something good to know, especially if you are there with your child. Or if you aren't able to be on scene, if you have someone else who's a close social support for them and someone they trust, especially if law enforcement do scare them, I think it'd be helpful to get one of those individuals on scene with them, because anytime that police do respond, you will almost always get 2 officers, just kind of how Salt Lake City does it. So almost always there'll be 2 who approach together. 2 of them, they'll show up on scene. If us as social workers are working during that time and we get called out, you can always request a social worker through 911. You can also request a CIT, the Crisis Intervention Team, and those are the officers who are trained in that 40-hour mental health training course. And like I said, social workers won't always be there. We're working to get us 24/7. That would be ideal, because we would love to be there and help alleviate a lot of different things that come up. And so if it's us as social workers responding, it will be one of us social workers and one of us officers approaching and coming to talk to you. And as social workers, we are dressed in plain clothing. We do wear ballistic vests. They are under our shirts though. And so you may see someone in jeans and, like a shirt, and then there will be an officer with us who will be in full uniform. It's not as the uniform that our officers respond with aren't your typical uniform that's all blue and all the buttons. They're more like a casual polo shirt and khaki pants. But I do say that just to clarify too, because I know with some individuals, apparel makes a big difference. If I see a uniform, I may be drawn to that uniform. The uniform's cool, I want to see that. And I know some of you guys are thinking the same thing with your own children of, oh no, they don't like police, they don't like that, or they love watching police shows and this is exciting for them and they want to talk to an officer. And I know it's different for each and every one of you, or some children may be neutral to it. And so if you do have someone who is like a close support to them and you aren't able to be on scene with them, then it would be helpful to get someone on scene with them who they feel safe with, especially if they are going to the hospital, because of the fact, like I said, they will, the medical EMS will want to touch them and do the blood pressure, heart rate. And so just stating that and making that clear to your children that, hey, this is, just for us to get up there. You don't always have to have your child ride in the ambulance if you're there, or even if you're not there, the police officers can call you. It's just regular protocol for them to transport in an ambulance unless a family member is comfortable enough to transport them themselves. So you won't be forced to use an ambulance unless your child is at risk of hurting themselves or hurting someone else. Hurting themselves, it will still be up to you as a parent if you feel comfortable enough to transport them to the hospital. With them wanting to hurt somebody else, that's when it's going to be tricky, and officers are going to encourage an ambulance ride just for everyone else's safety. And officers follow the ambulance to the hospital. And it is up to you as well to choose which hospital to go to. Depending on your insurance coverage, I know that makes a big difference. That, hey, we want to go to primary children's or go to the university. And that can be stated too when you do call 911. If, say, you're at work, you're not at home and family's communicating, an interaction is happening at home, then, you can state the goal is to get them to the hospital, ideally primary children's hospital. Here are the things that they do like. Here are the things that they do not like. And so I think those would be really important to point out. I do notice there are some chats right now in the box. So let me look at some of those real quick. Let me scroll. Okay, let's see. The most relevant in my section. Okay, I see one. And correct me if all officers get this training, and is it mandatory? That's a great question.
Your speaker's a little wonky.
Is it? Okay, thank you. How about this? Is this any better? Perfect. It goes in and out randomly, so thank you, Adam. So I have here, Kara, do all officers get this training? Is it mandatory? In Salt Lake City, I can only speak on Salt Lake City, Salt Lake City Police Department, it is mandatory for all the Salt Lake City officers to do that 40-hour crisis intervention training. And then officers do recertification. So throughout the year, they have to do more training hours to stay up to date on that. But then we have our 4 officers on our team who specifically seek out even further training to go to more mental health calls with us as a team, with us social workers. And as social workers as well, we go through this training course too, which is really interesting because I went to school for social work, and you know, I used to work in the Salt Lake County Jail, and then when I came to the police department, you can be trained in mental health so much, but when you see stuff on the streets, you see the raw, real stuff, you learn a lot about, you know, what's happening, and it's not a controlled environment. Let's see. Have we ever dealt with people with autism? Yes, we do deal with children with autism and adults with autism quite a bit. I would say I probably, for sure, at least once a day when I'm out responding to calls, I've been out on someone with autism. I'm gonna apologize in advance. I got a big dog who's gonna try and join me. And so, yes, we do go out on different calls. Go over there, go lay down. It may be one that I've been out on was the child didn't want to go back into their house, and mom needed to leave for work, and this child had a caretaker who would come in while mom was at work, and the child was mad at the caretaker for the day and did not want to go in and was hitting the caretaker in a different way than what this child had hit the caretaker in the past. And so us trying to figure out, you know, talking to the child, figuring out, you know, what did they want for the day, hearing them out, understanding them, you know, trying to be creative. And one of the officers ended up buying the child ice cream, you know, because that was something that they loved and that would calm them down a lot. And they were nervous around the officer, so the officer brought the child ice cream in hopes to build that relationship, make them feel more comfortable. And we've also been out on children with autism who are nonverbal too. It may be that we located a child, someone called 911 because there was someone in their lobby. There was a child in their lobby and they weren't sure who they were, where they came from. And so I've been out on quite a few of those calls of we show up and we see a child, we recognize they're nonverbal, and then we start to try and figure out, like, what do we do? Usually what happens is the social workers will stay on scene with that child, and we'll try and find out, you know, figure out any way to communicate. Does this child like to draw or scribble stuff? Or are they sensory? Do they want to touch something? And then the officers will then work behind the scenes to start going to locations close by and calling around and seeing if anyone has their child missing, or searching any history of, sometimes officers already know the child when they show up on scene, because this child has went to this location more than once when they left home, because they really like the lights there in that lobby. And so that's kind of their go-to place. And so some officers are like, hey, how you doing? And we still don't know who the child is yet. And so those are common ones to go to if someone calls 911 because they can't figure out who this child is and where they belong. And so we work to try and get them back with the family. And so those ones, you know, those ones are definitely hard. And we also work with the family too, because that's always overwhelming and scary. And once we get them reunited and making sure everyone is okay after that. When a person calls, Lisa, when a person calls a non-emergency number, are they just really calling dispatch or someone else? Great question. When you are calling, so we have 911, which is immediate emergency, and then you can also call for Salt Lake City, 801-799-3000, and that's non-emergency. And so non-emergency means, okay, this can hold off, or this is kind of a concern. I don't necessarily need people right now. You're still talking to dispatch. No matter if you call 911 or C line, you will still get dispatch. And so giving all that same information is helpful. I will say that the response time will be slower as non-emergency, because whenever a call comes in through 911, they prioritize those based off of there's different levels, like a priority 1, a priority 2 that they have to respond to in certain times. And so if it isn't, and say if you do call non-emergency line, you're not sure if this should be 911 or if this should be a non-emergency call, dispatch can decide that for you. They may say, no, we're going to send an officer out there right now, And so they will still send that over to dispatch even if you did call non-emergency. So that will still be covered for you. Let's see down here, that was for Lisa. Any other follow-ups to those ones I've answered so far?
I don't know if you actually answered my question, but I just wanted to prove the point if you're okay with this. Just wanted to share my thought about what you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I work in I volunteer in a adaptive recreational facility in Summit County, and
Okay.
and when we all heard what happened 3 weeks ago,
Right.
when we decided to step up, a friend of mine actually sent me this link to join the meeting to you guys. So I am a person with autism, and on my behalf, I would like to disclose some information on my behalf. So if you want, you can ask me those questions.
Did you have an additional question, Adam, at this time for Jessica?
Oh, yes, I have a question this time for Jessica, and I know you answered my question, but I have another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you serve in Summit County, and what is the appropriate way to approach somebody with a disability if you're law enforcement? Like, let's say Park City Police Department or Summit County Police Department. What is the right way to approach them?
That's a great question. Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, yeah, there's a tactical side to it, a police side that I can't speak on. And there is, I think, personal too. I think for you, Adam, you may have your own preference on how an officer approaches you, and someone else may have another preference. So that would be helpful when calling 911, like, hey, I don't want an officer approaching me. I would rather they talk to me across the street for a little bit. But it's, like I said, I'm only speaking for Salt Lake City, and there's a tactical side of it, and that's just a matter of how police approach people together. They almost always will approach with two officers together, and almost always they're coming up from in front of you. If they're coming up from behind you or beside you, then they will almost always call out as well of like, hey, Salt Lake City, we're coming up. Like I said, this is more tactical, and I'm a social worker, so I can't speak exactly on that. But I do think it's helpful, like if you have your own preference of, I don't feel safe if they were to approach me this way, to state that too.
I mean, let's face it though, you don't even know if a cop's a good guy or a bad cop. It's just that it depends on the officer, and they don't know if they have like proper training or education, all that so. But would you have appropriate training and education for those officers if that case in Salt Lake City?
So we have the, with that training, that 40-hour crisis intervention training, we do go over autism in that training course. But I do think we can, yes, we go over that training course. I think with every disability, we could go even further and I think we could even have a 40-hour course just on autism, you know? There's so many different levels to it, and I think that would be helpful to do that. But yeah, all of our officers do go through that crisis intervention training. And so it doesn't mean it's perfect, that's for sure. And I don't know all the details to the case. Like, was it already 3 weeks ago that happened, but it was just released last week. Yeah, so they're still sorting through all of that stuff. And there's a lot to figure out, and a lot to figure out how do we improve, how to make sure none of that happens.
Right, and you're right on your point, Jessica, about proper training and education. But hey, where did you go?
Sorry, I'm turning a light on.
Sorry, it's all good. It happens all the time when you're working from home. I have a cat, Simba, who's actually right by my computer right now.
So I actually have a follow-up question, Jessica. There was a question that made it onto the chat during our first presentation about an autism registry on the Salt Lake City Police Department's webpage. And I wonder if you could speak to that. There were also questions about its effectiveness.
Yes, great question. So that is still new. I will say if anyone is in West Valley,
Jessica, I don't know if you can hear us, but I think
West
you're
Valley, please.
for us. Oh, there you are again.
Really? Am I good now?
We
Okay.
lost you when you said if you live in West Valley, so you can start from there.
Okay, thank you. If you live in West Valley Police Department has an awesome program. And their program is for you to fill out a form online to give details of like I mentioned before, my child loves water, hates lights, loves Barney, hates Power Rangers, different things like that. And so West Valley, I will say their program is definitely more advanced than our program is. So West Valley Police Department, if you live in West Valley, I would encourage you to go and submit a form with them. And it is all those details. And it has emergency contact. Or if your child is nonverbal, to give those descriptions of, you know, what are the movements they normally are doing? Are they, you know, slapping their hand? What is it they're doing all the time? So that way, if we do locate a child, and all we can see is their nonverbals, and they can search that and figure out, okay, we can narrow it down to this child about this age, and then from there we can start calling emergency contacts. So for Salt Lake City, our program is still new. I will say West Valley's is more advanced. That's kind of who we took it from. And so it's a newer program, and we're still figuring out all the details to it. But just like them, it is helpful for us. Like I said, the officers work behind scenes to figure out if we find a child who is missing and we can't figure out who they are or what their name is. That's when they'll search that database and try and narrow down, like, what age is this child, kind of filter that out. What ethnicity are they, all those little details too, to help figure that out. But it is still new. We're still trying to grow on it in hopes that we can get everyone in Salt Lake City who has autism to be on that. And that's more of the benefit for the child and for us. So if I have autism and I have a detailed sheet filled out through the police department, and someone calls 911 on me, I'm in emotional distress, I'm in a crisis, and they give my name. When they give my name, that sheet will pull up. There'll be a tab that pulls up for the officer that says, okay, Jessica, these are the things she loves, these are the things she hates. Here's a person that she really likes to talk about. And so that helps the officer figure out, like, okay, I can start going this route to talk to them. Or us as social workers, it also helps us so we're not starting fresh and trying all different things to be like, okay, you know, they like textures, they're very tactile, let's bring something on scene for them to be able to touch, and then they'll be more likely to talk to us. Yeah, it's a great question. I would strongly encourage people to fill it out. It is still new, so we're still working through those details, but West Valley City definitely has a really good program.
Can you send us a link to the website on the chat?
I can try to. Do you happen to, or whoever had it earlier, if you're able to do that, I'll try and do that towards the end of it. Or I can follow up with an email. Let's see.
I think I can try and look it up. Let me see what I can find.
Thanks, Adam. That would be awesome. Was there another follow-up as well from an earlier chat? If not,
No,
I'll go back through this.
People are just wondering if you're aware of that sort of system expanding, and I realize, you know, you're with the Salt Lake City Police Department, so you may not know, but have you heard anything in terms of expansion?
I have not heard anything in terms, at least for that autism sheet specifically. I have not heard of any details on that yet. It is new, but I'm pretty sure they will love to expand on it some more. Let's see.
I found it.
Oh, can you send it to us, Adam? That would be awesome.
I actually looked it on my phone. Let me just try and see if I can send this out to everyone.
Thank you.
I have permission to do that.
Oh, that was for Amanda had a question in the chat. Shelly. Oh, Amanda answered that. Okay, sorry. I'm just getting caught back up. Yes, it is helpful to know, Stephanie, you did state it's helpful to know a social worker can come to 911 call. I think a lot of people don't know that. We have been around, as social workers have been around for 4 years, but there's so many calls that happen in the city. It's by chance if you get us or if you know to request us on scene. So my adult son had a meltdown and harmed family members and damaged property. Dispatch was called, took him to the hospital, and sent him to behavioral center. And now he is being charged for what he did. Is that right? Ooh, that's a heavy question, Jennifer, and I think it's a tricky one. Yeah, I don't know all those details. I know for police, like I said, I can't speak on the police side, but I know if there is ever domestic, someone is injured. In Utah, the protocol for domestic violence is pretty strict. And so almost always someone gets charged with that. I don't know if your incident, Jennifer, was a domestic violence or what that was as. I am glad that they did take him to the hospital instead of going to jail, but I can't speak on if that was right or not. I do think it would be important. I used to work for the Salt Lake Legal Defenders. I do think it'd be important if your child has a disability and they are charged with something, say a criminal offense. It is always helpful to speak with, if you need, like so Salt Lake City Legal Attorney's Office, LDA office, you can speak to them about, say, competency. Competency is, does my child understand the charges that they were given with? Or mental health evaluations, letting them know of my child's diagnosis. A lot of times that will help out the case, and either that will help drop charges or lower charges depending on what the case is. And then a lot of times you can also plead to doing mental health treatment of, okay, what they did do, they injured somebody, bodily injury. They also didn't understand what they were doing. And so I do think it's always important to speak with the legal defenders, or if you have your own attorney as well, and explaining that. That's just kind of my past history. I used to do that working in the court system, so just knowing that side of it, but that's not on the police end of things. Let's see, so sorry I don't have a specific answer for you, Jennifer. I think there's probably a lot of details I don't know, and yeah, I think just speaking with the legal offenders would be helpful. Let's see, next one I have here. Shelly, we always had to call the local police department to de-escalate our son, and now that he is 18, it's now turned into where the police department will target or follow him around town. It's really frustrating to him where he's afraid to even go outside thinking the police are after him. What do you suggest we do to ensure he is protected but not feeling he's being targeted, especially since he is Black? Yeah, I think that's a great question. And yeah, like you said, I'm sure he's feeling targeted, and also I think because he has a long history of police as a juvenile, I think what would be helpful, let me read some more. Turn 18, go outside. I think having just conversations. I think, Shelly, I don't know if you are in a small town or a big jurisdiction of a police department, or if it's like a small police department, because I think that makes a big difference if you're in a rural area versus, Salt Lake City Police Department. I think rural areas, it's easier to have those intimate conversations with police and be like, hey, I know you guys have had a lot of interaction with, say, Johnny when he was a juvenile, because you guys were the ones who could help de-escalate him. He's more stabilized now, or he's not as reactive now these days. But we do notice it feels like he's being followed. I think just pointing out and having those conversations, because sometimes maybe for a police department, to them, it's like, oh, we're maybe an officer's eyes. It's, oh, we're kind of around Johnny just because every now and then on Tuesdays it tend to be his bad and his off day, and just want to make sure he's okay and we're close by if something goes wrong. But yeah, I don't know. I would say just trying to have those conversations or voicing that concern to the police department specifically. Would be like, hey,
thanks for answering my question.
Mm-hmm.
This is Shelly. I'm the one that asked that.
Yeah.
With my son, so he's got a plethora of mental illnesses and learning disabilities, and so you know, that's what's so hard is, so you think I just live in Davis County, so it's actually a pretty big, I live in a bigger city, but so you think it'd be good to just go to this police sergeant that's over everybody, or I'm just curious how that would.
Right, like how exactly do you talk to them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, do you witness it yourself, Shelley?
Oh, yeah, we've seen it.
I would say, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. We've seen it, and yeah, so.
Yeah, I would say, Shelley, if I were you, I would call the non-emergency line and ask to speak to a supervisor. And so what will happen is a sergeant would call you and say, hey, I'm the supervisor on call, right, or I'm the supervisor working right now. And then for you to voice, hey, I've noticed there's been officers following Johnny around. We don't feel comfortable with it, or, you know, it's triggering him, it's upsetting him. I just, you know, I'm wondering about this. I want to make sure that there's nothing going on behind scenes. I want you guys to know that we aren't feeling comfortable with that. But I think it'd be important to call and ask for the supervisor, to speak with the supervisor, and then they can check into it.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
That should be the same issue too, though, by the way. From what you were talking about, there should be some sort of special line with every single police department.
Yeah, and I think at least for like a lot of police departments, it's asking to speak to the supervisor, but knowing that is a big thing, because a lot of times people don't know you can ask to speak to the supervisor who's working during that time. And if you have a negative interaction, say you have an interaction with police and it was negative and you did not like how it went, you can also call in and say, hey, I would like to speak to a supervisor, or when you're on scene, I would like your supervisor to come, and the supervisor can come during that time, or they will call you later. And then you can also file what's called an IA, internal affairs case. A lot of times those are going to be done online, or you can also call the non-emergency line and say, I have a complaint to file, and then they can transfer you to that office to state what that complaint was. I see another message. If your child's banging aggressively and someone in the public calls the police on them, are there circumstances where the police can take the child away without your permission, like for hospitalization or to a home type of situation? I see that a lady earlier told where her adult son with autism has been taken by police and being charged. That's standard once they're 18 and older. That's a great question, because yeah, someone may just witness your child, you know, they're okay, they're safe, but someone sees a child acting aggressively or banging aggressively, they call 911. I think the question here was, can they take your child away without your permission, like for hospitalization or home? If an officer is ever taking a child to the hospital, they almost always have to get in contact with a guardian. So unless they are in immediate danger, you know, if like this is a medical emergency, or they're hurting themselves, or say like a suicide attempt, that's when those exceptions are going to play, where they're going to take them immediately. But I would say even with a child acting aggressively and banging, each police department is going to be different, but I think it is important to say that they're only going to the hospital if they are in immediate danger to themselves. So immediate danger is, I'm saying I'm going to hurt myself, like a suicide, or I'm going to say kill this person. Those are immediate dangers, is what we call those. So especially with like a child with autism acting, and you know, if I'm banging my head, that's not going to be what's considered an immediate, you know, immediate danger to them. But the biggest goal for them is to get in contact with the guardian. First things first, to decide, do you need us to help you get your child back home, or do you want your child taken to a facility? Facility meaning a hospital. And then I think it is important, if say there is a juvenile detention facility, that in this question it asked, you know, will your child be charged as a standard? I think just if there's a criminal offense happening, it's going to be up to the officer to charge. So that one gets tricky. Like I said, you can always speak to the legal attorney on that end of, you know, there's a mental health condition going on here. This is the normal for the child. We know it was not with intention to hurt anybody. So Yeah, that's important to know. If someone calls 911, you aren't there because they see your child acting aggressively, they will have to try their best to get in contact with a guardian, first and foremost, to be like, hey, we want to take them to the hospital. And you can say, no, that's their normal, they're fine, let me come and pick them up. You can always say, no, you don't take them to the hospital, because you are the adult, you are the guardian, you can say so. So that will be up to you in the end there. Sorry, I'm behind on a lot of questions here. Thank you for, I see the link was on there. I have a question about calls that involve deaf and hard of hearing individuals, children and adults. Is there a registry for them for the Salt Lake City? And how do you manage inaction with either an individual that uses ASL or has assistive listening devices like hearing aids or implants but need to see your face? What specific advice could you give the parents of deaf children? That's a great question, and thank you for touching on that, as I haven't touched on that at all. From my understanding right now, there is not a registry on that like we have with autism, but we do have officers who can do ASL, and so I do think that's important. And through our dispatch, when you call dispatch, you can use I'm sorry, I don't know the translation thing through the dispatch, but I do think requesting ASL is important. And because we do have officers who do ASL all the time, which I think has been awesome. I know minimal stuff, and so it'd be important to state that, and also stating, especially with COVID right now, I think that's where it gets tricky with, seeing somebody speaking is really important. And so I think stating that as well. And so for Salt Lake City right now, officers are mandated to wear, the mask when they are contacting the public on behalf of the public safety. But I think if you were to state, hey, my child needs to be able to see lips and have someone signing to me, then that would prepare the officers to talk to their supervisor who's going to come out on scene, like, hey, are you going to allow me to take off my mask and stay a certain distance away? And so just communicating that would be really important, because or else it's gonna be such a challenge with those masks right now. I can't imagine it, because we don't have any of those clear ones right now. But making sure to state, I need ASL translator. And hopefully you would get an officer. If not, then they would go through dispatch. We have, what's it called? Like a translation phone. So it'd be through the phone. And I'm assuming you guys have your own listening device, but I know not every family would have one of those. And so they would just try and get a hold of somebody to get out on scene who can do ASL. But I appreciate asking that question. Yeah.
Jessica, can I make a comment?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually an interpreting student for American Sign Language.
Oh, sweet.
So some of the couple of things that people can do if they need that. The TTY is a little bit outdated, Julia. I'm reading the chat too. Is that there is VRS, which is Video Relay Service, which is if you have a deaf child or a deaf adult, they have a phone service that they can use to contact like a regular telephone call with a live interpreter. The other thing that can be requested if an officer cannot bring an interpreter on scene, or if they do not know sufficient ASL, is called Video Relay Interpreting, or VRI. And those are two services that can be requested in order to facilitate that interaction. I hope that will help. I don't know a lot yet, as I'm just a student, but
that's so helpful for me.
Yeah, those are some ways to help those. And like I said, sometimes we get all confused with the acronyms. So VRS is deaf person, interpreter, hearing person. VRI is that the deaf person and the officer are in the same location and the interpreter is offsite, but through a video. VRI can be used through almost any platform. And especially even hospitals are set up to do VRI and other things too. So that is an option. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you for letting me share.
You guys are awesome. I appreciate. Are you going to say something, Jackie?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much, Miranda, for that information. So my kids, they have, cochlear implants and hearing aids, and so they use spoken language, but the masks, like you said, that really is such a huge challenge. But being a parent consultant, it's really important to know, you know, what kids that are using ASL and families that are using ASL, they're going to need to know too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you adding into that too. I apologize, I'm really behind on these questions, but Kara, as you can understand, we as parents are scared. Yeah, my child is nonverbal and unable to understand get down and won't respond to stop from a stranger. How do we convey the severity of the disability to officers in the heat of the moment? I think that's what's most important, is to convey that through 911 when you call dispatch. The most important time is when you call dispatch and you say immediately they're nonverbal. They do not like yelling. State that right from the get-go, because we all know when you're in the heat of something, you know, when officers were to show up and your child may be acting out and they're nonverbal, we're not going to have time to explain that. No one's going to have time, and you as a parent, you're going to be in the zone, and that's not going to come across your mind, or it might, but it's going to be hard to convey that right away. So I think what's most important is to say that through 911. That's going to be the most important time, because when an officer gets a call, they may be driving around and they get this call, all the details will come up on their computer where it says what came in through the 911, nonverbal, does not like yelling, this and that, and so they can read that before they get on scene, versus them showing up and all they hear is an autistic child. So they may not know, you know, where are they at on the spectrum. And so showing up on scene and then figuring out, oh, they are nonverbal, does get trickier that way. So I think it is, if you are able to, or if you're the person who said, someone else called 911 on my child, and you realize that, you can always call into 911 and say, I believe someone called 911 on my child. I think officers are on their way, or officers on scene. Can you please communicate that, you know, they're nonverbal, so that way you can get through to and during those moments, if an officer is already on scene and you've called in and you're not able to talk to the officer, that's when dispatch will call through the radio to them directly and say, you know, officer so-and-so and so-and-so, we just got information, this is a nonverbal autistic child. So even if they are on scene, you can still call in and say, officers are on scene at this location. They can pull that all up, and then they can immediately call over the radio to those officers. So I think that's a great question to ask as well. And I definitely scared, understandable for sure. And that's why it's helpful that we're having these conversations, because it can also help me figure out how we can educate the system even better, educate the officers on different stuff, how we can expand. I apologize if I skipped any because this thing is jumping all over, but Lisa, what happens if a 13-year-old high-functioning boy punches a 7-year-old girl in the face? By his own admission, he punched her as hard as he could. Am I responsible as a parent? Ooh, that's a legal question. I don't think you as a parent are responsible. I think it's still on the child. But it's more of a legal question. Yeah, high-functioning. I don't believe you as a parent, though. I think it would just be more of a matter of, yeah, how can we help out every party involved? But I don't know the answer to that one. I don't believe that you as a parent would be charged for neglect or anything like that. I would highly doubt that one. But that's more the police side. Let's see. Mandaria, are you the one that does the ASL? Oh no, that's Amanda who is speaking to her. Amanda, okay, let me see. Am I getting to all the ones for me? Let's see. Amanda, Karen. What if you are not the one to call dispatch? This is from Karen. What if some random person thinks a child or adult is out of control and calls to report this to police? What can you say to the officers when they show up to help them quickly understand that the situation is not as serious as the caller thought? That is a great question. I think for autism and for any mental health condition as well, or developmental disability, I think that'd be really important to state. But you are not the caller. Officers are showing up on scene. This is kind of how I'm imagining it to play out, how you're explaining. A random person calls out on your child, you're on scene with them. What can you say to the officers quickly so they understand the situation's not as serious as the caller thought? I think it'd be most important. There's a lot of factors that go into play. If you, like I mentioned before, if you know that someone already called on you or on your child, for you to also call into 911 and say, I believe this person just called in, they saw my child acting out, you know, we are okay. Maybe your child was hitting you. and someone didn't understand what was going on, and for you to say, we are okay, we're at, I think address is always important. That's how they're going to pull up that call. And that description is stating what location you're at, they most likely called on you at. But I think if officers are already showing up and you didn't know it and you're on scene, you know, you're with your child and officers are showing up, I think it'd just be important. Yeah, there's a lot of different factors playing in. I think it'd be important for you to try and step like in front of your child and say, I'm the parent, they have autism, or I'm the parent and, you know, they're just acting out, or this is what's going on. I think noting I'm the parent, or everything is okay here. Let's clarify, or what did someone call 911 on us about? Like you said, everything's, you know, very unpredictable. So if you are ever able to call in beforehand, but I know you're not always going to know that. So when you see an officer, to immediately, you know, ask, is this, you know, what are you guys responding to? Usually they'll start off with Salt Lake City Police. We're here for such and such. And you could say, everything's fine here. My child has autism, or my child is this and that. Or also like signing, you know, with the hard of hearing or deaf, to start signing right away if that wasn't communicated at all. And so officers can see hand gestures and understand, oh, okay, we need to get an interpreter out here because, you know, we need to communicate better over here. So yeah, I think just for you to be vocal, to feel comfortable to be vocal as the parent and say, everything's okay here, my child has autism, or I do need help, I need help right now, my child does have this autism, or my child needs help with this. So I hope that one helps. And that one can be tricky, but I would just say, make sure just feel confident in knowing that you can speak up and you can state out loud, you know, what's going on, and like, hey, we're okay here. Because sometimes it can feel intimidating for officers to be coming up to you, and just know that you do have that voice and you can help calm that down. Let's see, officers, if there is a registry for autistic people and not one for deaf and hard of hearing, are there other registries for different medical or behavioral needs? If not, has that been something considered? That's a good question as well. Yeah, I think it would be, I don't know. I think that may be something that could be, I wonder if that could be pushed through the state, through legislation, that, you know, all departments, this is also up to each individual personally. Like, say if I have a mental health condition of schizophrenia, maybe I don't want the police to know I have that, and so I don't want that information. But, you know, like with our children, we want people to know that. And I don't think it would hurt either. I don't know where you are located at, Jackie. I don't think it would hurt either if you were to ever just call into the non-emergency dispatch and say, hey, if my name is in the system, or if my child's name is in the system, can we also put, you know, they are hard of hearing and these are the things. And they can always add stuff to any contact information they have. But that definitely is more on your end of the proactive side. I think that would be awesome, though, to build programs like that, especially for our children, just so we can make sure we are meeting all of their needs and nothing is being missed in the communication. But I think it'd be a good idea to expand on all those.
This has been amazing. We are so thrilled to have heard your expertise and the information you've provided to all these questions. This conversation style, I think, was very useful for this particular topic. So we thank you for the time you've dedicated to broaden our understanding